Okay, let's kick off this deep dive with a bit of a challenge for you listening. When you think about the very first, like, modern hospital,
Yeah.
the kind with actual wards, doctors who specialized, proper treatment plans,
Hmm.
and this is really key, totally free care for the public. Where does your mind immediately jump to? Paris, maybe?
London, or perhaps Florence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Europe, probably medieval or Renaissance times.
Right. And that's what most people would probably assume. But the historical evidence we've been looking at, it really points somewhere else entirely.
They're very different.
Yeah, the actual blueprint for this kind of organized, large-scale, and crucially secular healthcare,
Yeah.
it was established much, much earlier and way outside Europe.
So today we're diving deep into the Baghdad Bimaristan
That's right. Founded way back in 805 CE.
under Caliph Harun al-Rashid, right in the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. And this place, it wasn't just, treating sick people. It basically invented the whole idea of the university hospital.
And universal access to care, centuries ahead of its time.
So Bimaristan, the name itself just means house of the sick, right?
Literally, yes. Bimar for sick, stand for place. But the Baghdad version, it was so much more than just a house. Think medical complex. Now, they definitely built on earlier knowledge. Greek, Persian, Indian medical traditions were all part of the mix.
Sure, knowledge builds.
But the scale, the professionalism, the sheer organization here, that was truly revolutionary.
And that's what we're digging into, isn't it? The foundational stuff, the logistics, the funding models, the ethics that actually underpins a lot of our health systems even today.
Precisely. Understanding its roots.
Okay, let's unpack this revolutionary blueprint then. Before the Bimaristan, if you got sick and couldn't be looked after at home, options were limited.
Very limited. Any places that did exist were often religious, pretty small scale, and honestly.
Yeah.
They were basically places you went to prepare for death. Hospice care, essentially, not treatment centers.
Right. So the Bimaristan flipped that script entirely.
Completely. That's the critical difference. The whole philosophy driving the Baghdad Bimaristan was the expectation of recovery. It was designed from the ground up to cure people and get them back to their lives.
That shift from just managing death to actively pursuing cures,
Yeah.
that's huge. Must have required a whole new way of thinking.
And a whole new structure.
Yeah.
Physically, managerially, everything.
Which implies things like, thinking about separating patients.
Yeah.
Maybe infection control, stuff we think of as modern.
Exactly. They were way ahead on that. This facility in Baghdad was enormous. It was public, open to absolutely everyone.
Men, women, rich, poor, didn't matter.
Didn't matter one bit. Native, traveler, whoever needed care. And maybe the most sophisticated part was the layout itself. They mandated systematic separation of patients based on their illness.
Seriously, in 805, so not just one big room.
No way. You had dedicated wings, specialized wards.
Like what kind of wards?
Okay, so you'd have wards specifically for, say, acute fevers, others for surgical cases, wounds and injuries, distinct areas for eye conditions, which were a big focus, and separate clinics for infectious diseases. Even mental health had its own space.
Wow. So that separation wasn't just for neatness, it was medical.
Oh, absolutely. It was about preventing contagion, yes, but also about delivering focused, specialized treatment by doctors who knew that specific area.
And they thought about the environment too, didn't they? I read something about gardens.
Yes, that's another fascinating aspect. The sources mention clean, quiet halls, but also integrated courtyards, gardens, often with flowing water. These weren't just decorative. They were specifically designed to be restorative.
Calming, healing spaces, especially for mental well-being.
Exactly, factoring the environment into the recovery plan.
Okay, that focus on environment, the separation by illness, that's already miles ahead. But you mentioned it was public, open to everyone, which brings up the huge question. Funding.
Ah, yes, the money.
How on earth did they pay for it? Staff, medicine, food, upkeep. It must have been incredibly expensive, especially if care was free.
It was incredibly expensive. And yes, the sources are very clear. Care in the Bimaristan was completely free.
Complete
For every single patient. Didn't matter what your background was, your religion, whether you had a punny to your name or not.
free universal health care in 805 CE. I mean, today we struggle to make that work.
Yeah.
Was the Caliph just bankrolling it from the state treasury? That sounds vulnerable. Political winds change.
That's the genius of it. It wasn't typically funded by, fluctuating government budgets. It relied on a system called WASH.
WAF. Okay, what's that?
Think of it as a charitable endowment, but a very specific, legally protected one. It's like a perpetual trust.
So not just a one-off donation.
No, no. The Caliph and other wealthy patrons didn't just give cash, they endowed the hospital with income-generating assets.
Okay, like what kind of assets?
Things like farmland, apartment buildings, shops, markets, maybe caravanserais, places travelers stayed.
Right, things that produce ongoing revenue.
Exactly. And the WAC legal structure guaranteed that all the income from those endowed assets, say, the rent from the shops or the produce from the land, went only to funding the hospital forever.
Forever, like legally locked in.
Legally locked in. It couldn't be diverted for other purposes, even by future rulers. It created this incredibly stable, predictable, non-political revenue stream.
Wow, so that WAF system basically gave the Bimaristan financial independence and long-term stability. That's a game changer for understanding how they achieved universal care back then.
It really is. It provided autonomy and incredible durability. Many of these institutions functioned for centuries on this basis.
And this financial neutrality, was it reflected in how they treated people too? You said free for everyone?
Absolutely mirrored in the social approach. The Bimaristan treated Muslims, sure, but also Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, anyone who needed help. The only admission criterion was being sick.
Okay, but what about the staff, the doctors? In the heart of the caliphate, surely they were all Muslim.
Not at all. That's another key point. The physicians came from all sorts of backgrounds, different faiths, different intellectual traditions.
Really?
Yes. Baghdad at the time was this incredible melting pot of scholarship. What mattered for hiring was skill, knowledge, and crucially adherence to a strict code of ethics. Meritocracy in action.
So competence trumped everything else.
Competence and ethics. It was very explicitly a place of science and medicine, not a place for proselytizing or religious conversion.
That focus on objective medicine, it sets the stage perfectly for its other major role, doesn't it, as a center for education.
Exactly. We talk about university hospitals today as if they're a modern invention, but here it is, the model operating over 1,000 years ago.
It wasn't just treating patients, it was actively training the next generation of doctors, creating knowledge.
That's right. And the training wasn't just theoretical book learning. It was intense, formalized, and very hands-on.
How did it work?
Well, students learned by observing real cases directly in the wards. They attended lectures by senior physicians. They essentially apprenticed under master doctors.
Learning by doing.
And crucially, before they were allowed to practice on their own, they had to pass a comprehensive examination.
So like an early form of medical licensing.
Yeah.
To ensure quality.
Pretty much, yes. Ensuring a standard of care. And the curriculum was rigorous. They had to master the classics, of course, Galen, Hippocrates. Their works were foundational.
Standard stuff for the time, I suppose.
Yes, but they didn't stop there. They had to integrate that classical knowledge with the cutting-edge medical research and clinical findings of their own time.
So incorporating new discoveries, like whose work?
Well, figures like Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, you might know him as Raises in the West, and later, the hugely influential Ibn Sina or Avicenna, their clinical writings, often based directly on Bimaristan practice, were required reading.
Right, Razi, wasn't he the one who first clinically distinguished between measles and smallpox?
That's him. A brilliant clinician. That kind of detailed observation, differentiating diseases based purely on symptoms. That's real empirical science happening right there, moving beyond just repeating the ancients.
And this rigorous training came with a strong ethical component too, you said.
Absolutely central. Physicians took an oath, much like the Hippocratic Oath, but adapted. It codified high standards of conduct.
What kind of standards?
Things like they were explicitly forbidden from using patients for experimentation. Patient welfare came first. And they were absolutely obliged to provide the best possible care to everyone, regardless of their social standing, wealth, or background. Patient dignity was paramount.
That focus on ethics formalized like that in the 9th century.
Yeah.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Their priorities were clear.
Speaking of priorities, let's circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the specialized wards. You said there were even dedicated facilities for mental health.
Yes, and this is arguably one of the most striking examples of how progressive the Bimaristan was. Truly centuries ahead of its time.
How so? What was happening elsewhere at the time?
Well, if you look at contemporary Europe, for instance, mental illness was often viewed through a supernatural lens. Demonic possession, divine punishment.
Right, leading to things like exorcisms or just locking people away.
Exactly. Punitive measures or just neglect. But in the Baghdad Bimaristan, the doctors approached mental illness as a medical condition, something that could be studied, classified, understood, and importantly, treated.
That is a massive intellectual leap. Treating the mind like the body. What kinds of treatments did they actually use?
Their approach was surprisingly holistic and humane. They believed the condition could often be eased by changing the patient's environment and mental state.
So not just drugs or restraints.
No. They used methods we'd recognize elements of today. Things like talk therapy, physicians engaging patients in calm, rational conversation. They also used therapies involving the senses. Music therapy was common, with specific types of music thought to soothe different conditions.
And those quiet, calm spaces you mentioned. The gardens.
Yes. Providing clean, light-filled, peaceful environments was seen as therapeutic in itself. Those architectural choices we discussed, the gardens, the fountains, the quiet wards, they were integral to the mental health treatment plan.
It shows such a deep understanding of the connection between mind, body, and environment.
It really does. A fundamentally compassionate approach, likely rooted in both their medical understanding and, broader Islamic teachings about the sanctity of life and caring for the vulnerable. It resulted in this remarkably humane system.
Okay, so summing up, we've got this incredibly sophisticated model in 805 CE Baghdad.
Yeah.
Universal access, stable funding through WAF, rigorous medical training, high ethical standards, advanced treatments, including psychiatric care. What happened next? Did this amazing model just stay in Baghdad?
Oh, no, not at all. Harun al-Rashid's Bimaristan became the gold standard. The model basically spread like wildfire across the Islamic world.
Really? Where else?
We see major Bimaristans being established in other key cities. Cairo got a famous one in 872 CE. Damascus built the incredible Nuri Hospital in 1154 CE, which was renowned for its scale and refinement of the model. It sparked a whole golden age of institutional medicine.
But the crucial link for, listeners today, especially in the West, is how did this influence Europe? Did it cross over?
Absolutely. The influence seems to have happened in sort of two main ways.
Okay.
First, direct observation. The sources suggest that Christian crusaders and travelers visiting the Middle East saw these incredibly organized professional hospitals firsthand. They encountered nothing like it back home. So they brought back the idea, the organizational concept of a large, multi-ward specialized hospital. This likely influenced how later European institutions, like hospitals run by knightly orders, were set up.
They saw it worked and copied the structure. And the second way?
Transmission of knowledge. The actual medical science developed within those Bimaristan walls. Starting particularly around the 12th century, there was a massive translation movement.
Translating from Arabic into Latin.
Exactly. Huge numbers of Arabic medical texts, including the definitive works of Razi and Avicenna, packed with clinical knowledge from Bimaristan practice, were translated into Latin. These translations became the absolute core of the curriculum in European medical schools for centuries. They directly shaped Western medical thought and hospital development.
So it wasn't just the building layout, but the medical knowledge itself that transferred over.
Precisely. The content and the container, you could say.
So when we look at the core principles we still strive for in healthcare today, things like patient dignity, professional standards, medical education tied to practice, even the ideal of universal access.
You're essentially looking at principles laid down, codified, and put into practice in Baghdad back in 805 CE. It's a foundational legacy.
It really reframed how society approaches illness and care.
It absolutely did. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought, something for you to chew on. We talked about that WAFT system, that stable, independent funding mechanism based on charitable endowments, which kept these institutions running effectively for generations, even through political turmoil. If a system for funding free, comprehensive, ethical health care was successfully operated using that kind of protected endowment model back in the 9th century, what does that tell us about the struggles we face with funding public health care today?
Is the main problem now really a lack of workable mechanisms for stable funding? Or does the challenge lie somewhere else, maybe in priorities or political will?
Exactly. It's definitely something worth thinking about, reflecting on the structures we rely on or perhaps could create in our own time.